Are you exhausted from grinding day in and day out, pouring your sweat, time, and physical health into your work, only to watch a significant chunk of your hard-earned money get seized through what feels like outright extortion? Yes, I'm referring to income taxes. You put in those long hours, shoulder the risks of your job or business, endure a constant mental strain, and deal with the cumulative wear and tear on your body, all to see a portion of your earnings forcibly taken away. We're constantly told it's our civic duty to give back to the society we live in, because we benefit from services supposedly funded by those very taxes. But let's call it what it is: extortion. No one voluntarily hands over their money under threat of penalties, audits, liens, or jail time. The choice is comply or face severe consequences. That isn't choice, that's coercion, plain and simple. Some people defend this system with the classic argument: if taxes were optional, no one would pay, and everyone would be a freeloader benefiting from public goods without contributing their fair share. It sounds reasonable on the surface, almost noble, but it's a comforting narrative that's been drilled into us for generations. One that makes us feel virtuous for complying. What if that whole premise is built on a foundation of lies? What if the taxes you pay aren't actually funding the things you think they are? Many cling to disbelief because facing the reality is uncomfortable. It's easier to stay in denial than confront a system that might feel like betrayal. Others exhibit a kind of Stockholm syndrome, defending this current system because they've internalized the justification. But if we peel back the layers, the core issue starts with our money itself. The United States dollar we use today isn't truly our money in the way the founders intended. It's Federal Reserve notes, created and controlled by a private central banking hybrid institution. Today our government borrows money from the Federal Reserve. That comes with interest because they're borrowing what they do not own. To be able to service that debt and keep the system rolling, the government relies on taxation to generate revenue for interest payments while it keeps borrowing more and more. Yes, you heard that right. We are paying for the government's debt every time they borrow money. Pretty shitty, right? What's even worse is they're spending it on things most people would never approve of, but that's a topic for another time. Did you know that the U.S. Constitution grants Congress the power to coin money, regulate the value, and only gold and silver were recognized as constitutional legal tender for debts? That means the money we use today is technically unconstitutional. This nonsense could have all been avoided many years ago, because the founders were very aware of the centralized banking power and warned us of it. Figures like Thomas Jefferson warned passionately against it, arguing that banking institutions would concentrate wealth, corrupt legislatures, and undermine the people. They feared paper money not backed by precious metals would lead to inflation, speculation, and loss of liberty. Sounds like what we're seeing today, right? Central banks are not something new. They were even attempted early on by the first and second banks of the United States. But those central banks were faced with fierce opposition and were eventually dismantled. Yet despite those warnings, the Federal Reserve Act created the system during financial panics and debates over banking reform. Critics at the time and many since saw it as a handover of monetary control to private interests under the guise of public benefit. Now listen closely so you can see the scam for what it is. If the first dollar loaned out by the Fed carries interest, where does the money to pay that interest come from? It doesn't exist in the initial creation of the principal. The system requires ever more borrowing to generate the additional funds needed for interest payments, creating a perpetual cycle of expanding debt. The government can't simply pay it off without borrowing more money from the same source. And that source can print it out of thin air and loan it out with interest. This leads to endless deficit spending and reliance on more debt. So where do your tax dollars really go? Not primarily to the services we're led to believe. The government funds much of its operations and its growth by continuing to borrow from the Fed or through treasury securities bought by various entities, including the Fed itself. Meanwhile, corporations and private entities often step in to build and expand the economy. And by doing so, these corporations receive tax incentives, loopholes, subsidies, and tax breaks that encourage them to invest. They fund much of the economic expansion and physical development we see, not your income taxes directly. So why are they taxing our income? The short answer is, because we the people have become lazy and weak, and they know it because it's part of the plan to maintain control over us. If someone is entitled to your earnings that you earn fairly, wouldn't that mean that you're a slave paying your keeper? And whatever person thinks or agrees that someone else is entitled to your earnings that you worked hard for is a dumbass suffering from Stockholm Syndrome. Since those people are okay with it, then I guess they wouldn't mind you taking half their shit too. Another important thing to understand outside the income tax is the shadow tax. This tax isn't directly taken from you, but instead it erodes your purchasing power over time, making your dollars worth less and less. The shadow tax is very sinister. It will erode your purchasing power, making you work harder to afford the same things as you normally could. That means instead of one job to afford your bills, you will eventually need 2 jobs to maintain your current bills. It's disgusting. You probably know this shadow tax as inflation. It's the worst invention ever created. It allows the Fed to print worthless paper backed by nothing, giving them no limits on how much they can print and loan out to the government until it all becomes worth zero. However, it wasn't always like this. We didn't always have our money printed by the Fed. Back before the Fed, government issued its own paper money that were called certificates. Those were backed 1-to-1 by precious metals, limiting how much could be printed without corresponding reserves. That means the government wasn't allowed to print paper certificates without having enough physical gold and silver to back it up. Each certificate you could redeem for physical gold or silver. The certificates had no Federal Reserve stamp on them because the money belonged to the people and their government, not the leeches we have today. We have been sold on money creation mechanics and have shifted away from sound money principles. The current setup isn't the voluntary contribution we're sold. It's a scam that transfers wealth upward while keeping the average person working harder to sustain it. It's bullshit. If you're fed up with this endless cycle, and you can see through these scams we have been sold, then make sure to like this video if you agree, share to spread the word, and subscribe to join us. Stay strong out there. See you in the next one.